My grandmother is going through a rough time with her health. And well, my mom doesn't really know the best ways to take care of her, so my mom and dad have been fighting a lot lately, and that is until I found out my grandma's nothing more than a fat liar. I'm 18, female, and live with my parents, and I'm in my final year of school, the 12th grade. My home is a bit standard, traditional, with a stay-at-home mom and a dad who provide all the money needed by the family. My grandmother joined us when we started having health problems, which scared my dad and made him bring grandma over to the house. She started to forget little details and the people around her, and we all welcomed grandma with open arms and fussed over her because of her condition, and she was full of smiles due to the attention. To be honest, I don't really know my grandmother because she moved in, and I'd only seen her a few times during family occasions. I did know that she was a pretty sensitive woman, which could have been because of her age. I remember one time during a family dinner at her place, she complained about her health and showed us some test results from the doctor. Grandma's blood sugar was a bit high and she was at risk for developing diabetes, so she made a fuss about needing someone to do the chores around the house and watch her all the time because of her bad health. Grandma even suggested moving in with us, and Mom had mentioned that her test results were normal for people her age, then advised her to watch what she ate and rest more, and we all agreed with Mom, and that angered Grandma. To our surprise, she started to accuse Mom of insulting her and keeping her son away from her. After Mom apologized multiple times, Grandma managed to calm her down. That was by far the strangest dinner I've ever been to, and I learned to watch my words around grandmother. It did take a while to adjust to living with Grandma. She was constantly forgetting little details and needed help with almost everything. After confiding in my mom, I learned to juggle taking care of Grandma and focusing on my studies. Mom, on the other hand, had no problem running about, trying to make Grandma comfortable. She would cook extra meals because my grandmother was certain she did not ask for the one she made, and she would repeat house chores over and over because my grandma was sure Mom had not done so before. Something that easily got Grandma upset. I didn't understand why Mom kept making mistakes when it came to taking care of Grandma, and I always did my best to just dissipate Grandma's irritation whenever I could. Perhaps the challenge of taking care of Grandma and the household was too much for her. One time, soon after Grandma started living with us, she told Mom to do the cleaning in the living room on a Sunday. Mom had told her that she had done so, but after Grandma insisted, Mom told her that she would do the cleaning after getting some rest. Everybody had come down to see what the commotion was about, and Dad got angry after finding out what happened. He turned to Mom, reminding her that Grandma was old and that the slightest thing could affect her blood pressure. Mom tried to defend herself, and after a few more back and forths, Dad advised Mom to at least pacify Grandma if she could not do what she was told. That was the worst fight my parents ever had, and I had hoped that it would be the last, so to my disappointment, many more fights ensued because my mom kept making mistakes. A few days ago, I walked into the house, only to see that a few plates were on the floor. Some broken with their contents spilling everywhere, and Mom was being yelled at by Grandma, and I immediately intervened, asking Mom what happened. Mom had said that she cooked the meal for Grandma according to the instructions given, but Grandma had claimed to not have done that. Grandma accused my mom of making a meal she utterly disliked, and my mom, who did not know about it, tried to defend herself. They continued to bicker back and forth, and Grandma asked me to call my dad. Believe me when I say I almost did not do it, knowing what would happen, but my mom said to go ahead, telling me that it was fine, and Grandma accused my mom and then told Dad that my mom hated her to the extent that she was willing to serve her what she considered poison. And for the first time, I saw my mother cry. I immediately snatched my phone, but the damage had been done. I heard my dad yell at my mom later that night. It was safe to say that Dad had fully sided with his mother, and I decided I had to do something. Mom would always tell me that, as a child, I could not do much when my elders were discussing, but I'm 18, and I'm able to tell that Grandma, despite being old and weak, could be a bit gentler with my mom. After seeing my mom cry, my mind was made up. I was going to speak to my grandma and make her understand me. She would listen to her own grandchild, hopefully. All I knew was that I was not just going to sit back and be quiet, like everything was just fine. What do you think? The house is always tense and I'm tired of the fights between my parents, but a part of me believes I'll escalate everything by speaking to Grandma. She might tell my dad that I was defending my mom or something, and the last thing I want is to make things worse for Mother. What would you do? Update number 1. Now, I'm just really confused. My thoughts are all jumbled up, and in honesty, I'm confused about everything. After I made up my mind to talk to Grandma, it took a while before I actually did so. I went into her room the first night and she was asleep. The next time I tried to approach her to have a word with her, I chickened out. Finally, I managed to sit with Grandma while she was watching one of her favorite drama series. I asked her why she had always yelled at Mom, and she looked at me in confusion. She asked why I asked something like that, claiming that she would never yell at my mom. Grandma said she was only correcting Mom and would let her emotions get the better of her. I felt stupid at that moment. Here was an old woman who had health issues, and I was accusing her like a criminal. Perhaps Mom was the one being dramatic. Grandma was ill, and being as weak as she was mentally, she could easily confuse and mix up reality, leading to unnecessary disagreements and arguments, and I apologized to Grandma immediately and just tried to focus on the drama showing on TV, while doing my best to ignore my guilt. Grandma went over to stay with my aunt for a few days, and she had suddenly mentioned my aunt Dana's name during dinner one day. And my dad. Well, Dad arranged for Grandma to stay with my aunt and her husband, and I was quite happy about it because there would be fewer arguments in the house. Also, Aunt Dana would be able to care for Grandma in the way that she prefers, as her daughter. Unlike Grandma, I'd seen my aunt a lot in the past. She was a no-nonsense person and was possibly the strictest woman I've ever known. And I knew she did not hold back from scolding people or complaining when things did not go her way. Aunt had not placed a single call when Grandma stayed at her place, and even when we went to my aunt's to get Grandma, nothing seemed out of the norm. Everyone at my aunt's home said that Grandma was extremely docile during her stay, and that they enjoyed being with her. Aunt reminded us that Grandma was a weak, old woman, saying that whoever had problems with her while she was in this state that she was in clearly could not take good care of her. My dad turned to my mom and asked her to talk to Aunt Dana and get some advice on how to care for Grandma. Mom refused, stating that she could, take a very good care of Grandmother. Aunt Dana interrupted just then, calling my mom all sorts of various names and mocking her for being unable to do something as basic as taking care of Grandma. Truthfully, it was upsetting to watch my aunt do that, but my mom told her that she was more than capable and would do her best to ensure that my grandmother's stay with us was just enjoyable. The ride back home was tense, and I could feel it in the air. Dad frowned all the way through, and Mom, who was silent throughout the entire ordeal at the aunt's place, made sure to avoid his gaze. I felt like everything was all my fault, and I hoped that the tension in the air would die away. Mom and Dad argued that night, and I stayed in my room, thinking everything through over and over. Mom looked worse than she did a few days after our visit to my aunt's, and I'd seen her doze off twice during the day this week. Was she that burnt out? How had I not noticed this earlier? Was she perhaps provoking Grandma so she would leave the house? Was I overthinking everything? To my surprise, just yesterday night, I found Grandmother using the landline in the house, which was confusing. Usually, before she made a call, Grandma would ask either me or my mom to locate and contact in her phone book. And she did this for an entire year. How exactly did she manage to dial an entire phone number if she was really losing her memory? Did she memorize it beforehand? Because I was sure she was not holding a single piece of paper while dialing the number. My overthinking came to an end when I overheard Grandma talking about her plans, quote, falling into place. I almost asked for an explanation, but when I stopped to think, I saw a lot going wrong with what I've almost done. What plan was working? How did Grandma manage to start a call without anyone's help? Was Grandma really as sick as she claimed to be? Update number 2. Grandma is very sneaky for her age. I'll give her that. It was quite hard to piece my findings together, but I managed to do so, and I'll expose her and accomplice soon. I caught Grandma talking again on the phone just a day after the first time I'd seen her, and I decided to find out how long this has been happening for, because my curiosity was getting the best of me. To my surprise, the landline call log showed that Grandma had been making calls to the particular number for months now, and that she called at a specific time 3 times a week. How did no one notice this? Granted, no one went to the living room at night, especially at that hour, and was that why Grandma chose to make her calls at the time? My suspicions about my grandma kept growing and getting worse. Things weren't any better at home, and Grandma had insulted Mom yesterday, saying that she could not do anything besides be a stay-at-home wife. Grandma later brought one of her stained clothes and threw it at my mom's feet, asking why she did not wash the clothes properly. Unfortunately, Dad was around at the time, and he yelled at Mom, asking why she was hell-bent on frustrating his mother. I wanted to yell back at him, because he refused to hear Mother out. Even if she was in the wrong, why would you yell at her like she's a child? But I refrained from doing so and reminded myself that I would only be doing what was doing at the moment, mindlessly accusing my mom. The only difference was that my mom was too soft-hearted for her own good, while my grandmother would never let anyone insult her or demean her, whether or not it was on purpose. Mom cried on my shoulder early the next morning. I'd seen her in the living room around 3 a.m., going over some magazines, and she asked me to go back to sleep, but I asked her how she was faring, telling her I caught her downstairs all by herself, and to my surprise, Mom confided in me. She told me that she was really trying her best to be a good daughter-in-law, but that her grandmother, was not making it easy. She also mentioned something that scared me. During one of their arguments, Dad mentioned a divorce because he believed that Mom was responsible for every argument that ensued between his mother and her. Mom began crying while she spoke, and I did my best to console her as she cried, and she later apologized for her outburst, and my heart broke. Who apologized for speaking their mind and letting things off their chest? How long was Mom going through her troubles alone, and it was all because of Grandma and her constant outburst? And that was when it came to me. I asked a friend of mine to help out with the recording device, which I placed on the landline with ease. It made it easy for me to eavesdrop on a recording call and without being made using the landline. I made sure to be on alert when I knew Grandma would make her calls, and eventually I learned the entire truth. It was quite shocking to learn that the voice on the other end belonged to Aunt Dana. My grandmother and Aunt Dana had hatched a plan to cause problems between Mother and Dad. They both wanted Dad to request a divorce, and that was simply to get revenge on my mom. I'm not entirely sure of the details, but Mom had gotten on both Aunt and Grandma's nerves, and now they were going to try everything to frustrate my poor mother. I didn't even care what Mom did at that point, because nothing she could have done would justify their actions. And now I had the proof I needed to show Dad how vengeful his family members were. I hope he listens to the audio and judges properly. Update number 3. I'm doing my best to stop myself from laughing as I think of everything that happened over the past month. Mom is back to being her usual cheerful self, and the arguments between my parents have become a thing of the past. I took the liberty of asking my dad to call Aunt Dana and ask her to come over to the house for dinner. I used my grandmother as an excuse, saying that it would make her happy if we invited her daughter over. Dad was on board with the idea, right? And while I was baffled at how easy it was to get Dad to agree to invite Aunt over, it made my plan easier to execute. I wasn't sure if Grandma would act like the drama queen she usually is when Aunt Dana's around, so I had to make sure of that. Before dinner, I made sure to add a lot of salt to the food. It was a cheesy plan, but it was the best I could come up with on short notice, plus knowing how much Grandmother's doctor advised against excessive salt intake. Grandma was definitely going to act out in anger. I was counting on her to do just that. And she did what I hoped for on the night of the dinner. Aunt Dana, my grandmother, and my dad chatted away while Mom and I got the food ready in the kitchen. I made sure to ruin the food ASAP as soon as Mother stepped out. and after serving the food, I kept my eyes on grandmother, waiting for her outburst. She threw the plate of food on the floor, and both she and Aunt Dana threw insults at her, and I just stopped them immediately, telling them I was responsible for the inedible food. Grandma then told me not to defend my mother, and I yelled at her to remain quiet, shocking her and everyone else in the room at the moment. I told my grandmother that I was sick of her mistreating my mom simply because she was not fond of her. I also told her that I knew for a fact that she didn't have dementia and was fooling everybody. My parents tried to calm me down, but I kept on yelling at the top of my voice and insulted Grandma for being an immature, bitter woman. Grandma turned all her attention to me at that point, and all the anger I kept bottled up was pouring out in hurtful word after word. Dad grabbed me and told me to leave my room, and I told him I had something important for him to listen to. I played the best recording I had of both Grandma and Aunt Dana, where they were devising a plan to separate my parents. Grandma had suggested talking the idea into Dad's head, and my aunt said that she would back up Grandma whenever she needed to, and I can't say everything that was in the recording, but I did pick up that particular one just to play in front of everyone because it was most incriminating of the audios that I had of them. There was this weird, awkward silence, and for a moment I thought that everything I did was in vain. To my surprise and delight, Dad asked my aunt to leave the house, saying he needed time to think things through, and he did not spare Grandma a second glance. Walking out of the living room as soon as he had given his instructions, I made sure to give Grandma a long glare before leaving my room. Lord knows I was going to spit out more insults if I'd stay there any longer. I woke up the next morning to screaming voices. It turned out that Dad, had packed up all of Grandma's things and told her to leave. I held hands with my mom, and I just watched Grandma beg Dad to let her stay, but it was on deaf ears when Dad asked me to call an Uber because he didn't want to take Grandma himself. He immediately drove away for work after giving his instructions, and Mom told me to go inside. And when I asked her to come with me, she told me that she had a few things to say to Grandmother. It didn't take long, but when Mom came into the house, she was smiling, and I really don't know what she said to Grandma, but as long as she did not come in sad or with tears in her eyes, I was fine with it. Auntie called 2 days after Grandma left her place, and I took the call and asked what the problem was. Aunt Dana said that she had tried Dad's phone multiple times and had to opt for the home phone. She said she could not stay with her aunt because she did not have enough to take care of somebody else, and I respectfully told her that I'd tell my dad as soon as he got home, and she asked me to try convincing him as well. It didn't work out well for her. Dad refused to talk to her, and when I called to give her the news, she told me to leave my phone on speaker, which was when I was going to do anyways because I really wanted to hear what she would say to my father. My aunts began to insult everyone in my family, saying that we were horrible people for kicking a, quote, poor, helpless woman out. She also insulted my mother, saying that she was the cause of everything. She said my family did not want to take Grandma in earlier because Mom had said that she wasn't ill. Aunt defended herself by saying she could not stay with Grandma because she didn't have the financial means to care for her, and that Mom pushed that responsibility on her without a thought. She told Dad that she was coming over with Grandma and that he should shoulder his responsibilities and take care of his sick mother. Aunt Dana's words, not mine. While I could see where she and Grandma were coming from, they were still in the wrong. Dad shocked the both of us with his answer, and he warned his aunt not to step foot in his house, especially not with Grandma. He then reminded Aunt Dana that Grandma was also her mother, to which my aunt replied with the excuse that she and her husband were struggling and simply could not take on another person. Dad told her that she should have thought about that before joining hands with their mother to cause havoc in his family. Aunt begged and pleaded, but Dad turned a deaf ear to her pleas, and he reminded her not to step foot in his house, saying that he was going to file a restraining order against the both of them as soon as he left for work the next day. With that being said, Dad ended the call, and I gave him a hug and grateful for his support. Well, all this happened about 2 weeks ago. Dad had apologized to Mom and kept on getting her gifts every now and then, seeking her forgiveness, knowing Mom it was not going to take any time at all before she forgave my dad, if she had not done so already. My parents are currently out on a hot date, And it's for the first time in a while. I feel things are going to be okay with my family. Update number 4, final update, a very small added update. I didn't know I was going to drop another update, guys. Dad found out that Grandma got sick after spending 2 months with Aunt Dana. She got better after Dad intervened and helped out with her hospital bills, but Dad was not ready to take Grandma back in. Aunt Dana eventually took her to a retirement home because she and her family were moving to a 1-bedroom apartment. Her financial situation was getting worse, and she could not take care of Grandma anymore. I'm not sure I'll have any more news after this, so I won't be dropping any further updates. So, if it wasn't for OP, I think this grandmother would have got away with all what she was trying to do. What was going on with the aunt and grandma? They were so resentful towards OP's mother. For what? Just because they were, 1, jealous of her, or 2, didn't really like the way that she was acting or something. They don't really make it clear why they hated her so much, but I thought that was toxic and absolutely ridiculous. And then they tried to manipulate OP's father and saying, hey, it's your mom, you have to watch her. But OP's aunt is literally her daughter, and she didn't want to watch her either, and then she blames her finances on it. Guys, I do want to know your thoughts about this story because it was a dark one. Drop your comments down below. A lot of the comments from the original post were saying how they've had some similar experiences with family members and their family. Maybe you guys have been through something like today's story. Let me know. My name's Mr. Reddito. I narrate stories every single day. If you want to be a part of these stories, hit that subscribe button. I'll see you guys tomorrow. And remember, it's cool to be kind. See ya!